everyone. Thank you all for coming out on a rainy morning. It's nice to see so many faces here. I'm going to go over a couple of housekeeping details and then introduce our panel this morning, and they will get started. The first thing is this is the 20th year of the Newburyport Literary Festival, which is just amazing. As you all know, if you've attended before, it's a fabulous literary festival. There are authors all over town. Okay, now I'd like to tell you a little bit about our authors this morning. They're going to be discussing strong women on and off the page. And it's pretty interesting how they got started, how they met each other. It's a very nice story. So at one of our previous festivals, they connected over coffee and donuts at Newburyport's The Angry Donut. They started a group chat, and they've remained connected ever since. So they're reuniting this year to discuss their new work and strong or angry women on and off the stage. They've bonded over topics that they feel strongly about, and also their characters face challenges and need strength to get through them. So let me tell you a little bit about them. They're going to talk about the origin of their group, how they empower their characters, and the idea of supporting other authors. KJ Del Antonio. Sorry, I'm blocking her. I'm going to move this, so don't worry. She's the New York Times bestselling author of the novels The Chicken Sisters, Playing the Witch Card and In Her Boots, and the nonfiction book How to Be a Happier Parent, all of which center around the same themes: the challenge of figuring out what makes us happy, the need to value the life we're living more than the one in our phones and laptops. I think we could all use that. And the irritating fact that nothing, not reality TV, literary fraud, or witchcraft, will solve our problems for us. She's also the former editor of the New York Times parenting section, then called Motherload, the co-host of Am Writing podcast, and a passionate bookstagrammer. Bookstagrammer? Yeah. Okay. Hopefully she'll tell us more about what that means. She lives in Lyme, New Hampshire, so that was a bit of a commute. With her husband and ever-evolving cast of children, dogs, cats, chickens, horses, and house cats. And then Amy Popo, am I pronouncing your name right? Okay. She's the award-winning author of the novels Far and Away, The Sweet Spot, Musical Chairs, Limelight, and Small Admissions. Her writing has appeared in the New York Times, The Rumpus, Literary Hub, and Working Mother. She and her husband have 3 sons and split their time between New York City, Germany, and Connecticut. A lot of frequent flyer miles there, huh? Namrata Patel. She's a best-selling Indian-American author who lives in Boston. Her writing examines diaspora, dual cultural identity, while also touching on both the families we're born with and those we choose. She's lived in India, Spokane, London, and New York City. She's been writing for most of her adult life and loves creating characters who are relatable and aspirational. Her heroines range from quiet to kick-ass, and her heroes are swoon-worthy, if a little flawed. Her first novel, The Candid Life of Meena Dave, was longlisted for the Best First Novel Prize by the Center of Fiction. Other novels include The Scent of a Garden, The Curious Secrets of Yesterday, and her fourth novel, Your Next Life Is Now, will be released next year, 2026. Please welcome our authors.
Hi, everyone. How's the mic? Is this good levels? Okay, excellent. So I am KJ Del Antonio, and I have been tasked with a little bit of a description of our origin story. So what you see in front of you are like 3. Microphone. Here, try this one. How's this one? Oh, it's definitely better, I can tell. I could have shouted at you, but better for us all if I don't. So I've been tasked with telling you our origin story. What you see before you is but 3 of the Angry Donuts. Our other 2 are Jane Roper, who is not with us today in part because she's up for the Thurber Prize in Humorous Fiction, and our fellow donut Kirthana, who is not with us because she's at the LA Festival of Books. So there were 5 of us. And We got started in part because I am a bit of a stalker. I had been in the past to some literary festivals that were maybe a little less welcoming than this one. This literary festival, which this is my second time coming to, this is a joy. This is all-inclusive. There is every genre here, every author. The authors tend to be very, very welcoming. We spot each other at things and we say, oh, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking you don't know anyone and you have no one to talk to. Please talk to me. So I had the experience at some other literary festivals of feeling somewhat less than for a variety of reasons, including that what I write is commercial fiction, and you will find some writers of other genres who look down on that. And so what I did before I came was to read the program very carefully and spot writers who wrote in my genre, who wrote things that I both would write and would want to read, and memorize their pictures and then look for them. So when I got here, I basically trotted around like the bird in Are You My Mother and said, will you be my friend? And they were. And there are some others that I met under the same circumstances. And one of the experiences that we had here, or that we had all, actually not here, had jointly in our careers, was the experience of feeling a little set aside as a woman in this industry, which is really interesting because most readers are women, most buyers of books are women, and honestly, most writers are women. But we had noticed collectively that men tend to get elevated to a slightly different status, and sometimes tend to elevate themselves to a slightly different status. So when we all met, it was a little bit after the Me Too era, and one of the things that we bonded on was the different ways that maybe women writers and readers are much more inclusive and welcoming than some, not all, of the men in the industry that we've met. All right, so
she has a not safe for work way of putting it, so it was interesting to watch her try to. So it was really refreshing. We did sort of collectively gather around around a topic, and we started talking and realized that we write similarly. We're very different backgrounds, and yet there was a common experience that we all shared in this idea of what it means to be an author, a commercial author, versus, say, a literary or a poet or other types of authors. And some of the things that we came around, particularly in commercial fiction, is that as a woman, you're not really regarded as like a more serious. We had terms like chick lit, we had terms like, and so it's sort of already the marketplace sort of categorized us in a way that's not Jonathan Franzen, or that's not, help me think of names, but you know, they're on the New York Times bestseller list. Yeah, there are a lot of Jonathans out there. So in that commonality, though, in one of the valuable pieces for our meeting and the donuts is the idea of community, and that all of us have solitary professions, and we spend almost too much time by ourselves. For those of us that don't have children, we spend too much time by ourselves. And once you find your community, like yesterday, we haven't seen each other in almost 2 years, but it's mostly chat, right, thanks to digital. Your well is sort of filled again, and you're like, oh, I'm in this with someone. I'm in this with people that are having the same struggles. So for example, publishing is what it is. It said my book comes out next year, but it's actually going to come out in November, and it's up for pre-order. So that was a surprise to me. So these are things that we deal with that when you talk to your friends or when you talk to your family, they don't really understand, right? So finding this donut community was really, really awesome around that.
Yeah, I guess I would just add, we all sort of came to this profession a little bit later in life. I certainly did. I was 50 when I published my first book. And I think the biggest surprise for me was when somebody said, what do you think it's going to be like if you could look into the future? The one thing I don't think I would have said is, I would make a ton of friends. Like, I didn't see what one thing had to do with the other. And I think that's been the biggest, most delightful surprise for me, is that, you know, you make your college friends, and then, you know, in my case, I had kids, and you sort of make these family friends that are sort of centered on your children, and work friends. When I quit my job and I started doing this full time, I worried because I get weird. I spend a lot of time by myself, and I get really, I'm a little bit of a hermit by nature anyway, so I can lean into that. But I don't think I ever foresaw the female writing community, which, by the way, we welcome men. They don't show up. I'm happy to have loads of male writer friends, but they're not the ones who follow up. They're not the ones who say, let's get a coffee. They're not the ones who chat. Oh my gosh, I had to talk to you about something to do with my publisher or something that just happened to me. So it's just been such a surprise. So this was, I love this book festival, rain or shine, who cares? And it was just lovely to get to meet them and then to reunite again this year, because it really brought us together, and it's so valuable to me. I mean, now that I'm almost 60, like, my friendships are very valuable to me, so.
Totally agreed. And one of the wonderful things about being an author is, and I think some of our fellow authors maybe are missing, y'all are readers. None of you bought just one book. Like, you know, you're not, well, I read KJ's book, I'm done now, I guess I better find a new hobby. That's not how it works. So the ability and the strength that we find in being super generous with one another, because if you like my books, honestly, I'm telling you, you're gonna like theirs. That's pretty much a guarantee. And also, we can only write so fast, right? You need something else to read. So that's been one of my joyful discoveries in the world of being in community with all my fellow authors, is that we love to support each other. We recognize that supporting each other and encouraging people, the more you read, the more you read. So there's nothing to be, if you want to be sort of really transactional about it, there's nothing to be lost in sharing your friends' books, and so much to be gained. So we've really enjoyed that. And one of the things that you will find in common if you choose to read any or all of our books is that we write women and men, but we really work to make sure that our female characters are eventually find themselves to be as strong as we would like to be. Now, do you want to just talk a little bit about some of the choices that you make around developing a female character and giving her an arc that's not dependent on anyone else, but more about self-discovery? Because I know that's
my jam. Mostly because I don't know who I am, so in my characters I try to figure out who they are and maybe get some insight from them. I'm also a bit of a research heavy, like I like to go into different eclectic research. Like my second book is about a perfumer who loses their sense of smell, because I wanted to learn about perfumes. Now I don't buy perfume, so sometimes it's a double-edged sword. But yes, back to the question at hand. The characters, we write contemporary commercial fiction, so we write within the time. And time changes, right? We all know that 3 years ago is not the same as now, and 10 years ago is not the same as 3 years ago. So our characters have to sort of represent the time that we live in a way, at the age that they are, right? So when I think about my heroines, I'm generally 10 to 15 to 20 years older than the characters I write. So I have to sort of channel what that, younger millennial, now sort of Gen Z is, and what their sense of awareness is. I also write their mothers and their grandmothers, and I have to sort of think about how are they dealing with the current times? And then I have that dual hyphenated identity. So how is an Indian grandmother who's basically lived her whole life in America. What is assimilation for her? Because she still wears a sari and she still speaks the language, but she also watches General Hospital. And what does that do to the psyche of a woman who was married at 17, who then moved to America with her arranged marriage husband, to then be in this country of like, where love comes first, you know, and what does that mean? So when I think about characters and their arcs, and, you know, in general for women, we're just like, because we are who we are, we're just confused all the time, right? And it has nothing to do with biology. It's more around how much we absorb. We talk about emotional load, we talk about labor, we talk how much we absorb throughout our lives, from being a daughter, to a wife, to a mother, to a professional, to a grandparent. Like, none of us here are grandparents, but how much we absorb. So in writing, I try to excavate, like, when you start a character who is confused, what does that clarity look like at the end of it, right? And it has to come from a place of strength, because that's the time we live in. Ever since, you know, the feminist movement started, like, it is that women have to self-empower themselves. So we like to write characters that they don't need yes, you need a therapist, but they don't need an external person to come into your life and fix it for you. It's, how do I fix it for myself? That was a really long answer to what you were asking, but it is this journey that we take, because hermit life means you're constantly aware of all of these things in the back of your mind as you're writing, and then you have the editor voice saying, oh, but make sure they're likable. Well, sometimes ordinary people aren't likable, but they're still valued in society, right? So, I love that word, ordinary, by the way. I'm not saying it right. Ornery. Yesterday, I had to learn how to pronounce granite. So, but yeah, I think, Amy, if you want to talk a little bit about like how you look at the generational perspective of your characters.
Yeah, and I think I'll just say, also, you just made me realize something. We talk a lot about your writing style. Most writers are either what they call plotters or pantsers. I don't know if you've heard of this, but either you, and quilters, but generally, you know, either you plot it out and you're a plotter, or you fly by the seat of your pants and you're a pantser. I am a pantser all the way. And I think I just realized one of the things that you just said. I also don't know who I am. I'm also about to turn 60. Feel like I'm just still figuring things out, because I'm a very like self-reflective person. Like, I like to sort of sit and think about my life and how it's changed, and the women I know, and how reading their books makes me understand them better. But how do you, for me, how do you plot if you're figuring things out along with the character? Like, I'm in the head of my character, and they have this conundrum, whatever it is, and I don't know what the answer is, so I have to write the entire book to find out what the answer is. Which, what does that mean? Well, sometimes it means I get it wrong and I have to throw the whole document out and start over again. I would love to be a plotter, but it just doesn't work that way for me, because I don't know what I'm doing until I'm doing it, and often by the time I've done it and caught all of my mistakes, it's not too late. It just means I've got a lot of work ahead of me, because I'm sort of figuring it out as I go, and I just think that is like what I do in my life. I am figuring it out as I go, so that's actually like a perfect reflection of, you know, of who I am. We sometimes get a bit of pressure to skew our characters younger as commercial fiction writers. I'm finding as I age, I'm making my characters older and older to keep up with me. I had a woman in my book, The Sweet Spot, who's a grandmother, and she's one of my favorite characters I've ever written. And she's actually like the character that I get the most feedback on. Evelyn is, comes to Greenwich Village to visit her daughter and their insane, crazy family, and she has a lot of impact on sort of what ends up happening to this group of people. Interesting to me that if publishing sort of thinks we should skew our characters older, why does everyone like my oldest character the best? You know, it's getting a few ideas in my head, and I think my main character is going to be 60, and I don't know if I'm going to get pushback on that. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm probably going to get pushback on that. Honestly, with the book I'm thinking of writing, she should probably be 70, and I'm like willing to go to 60. I don't want her to be 50. That's too young to me. You're a baby when you're 50. So that's not quite the right age. So we think about age a lot. We have lots of, a full family. Like, what is a full family? You're going to have children all the way up to great-grandparents, and to me, that's the joy of putting an ensemble cast together, is having the various ages, experiences of life. So we have to sort of fight that a little bit, but I think we get our way most of the time.
I too have felt that pressure to make my characters younger. So as you're reading, if you're thinking to yourself, why are there never characters my age? That's a thing that happens. I've tried to buy a book for my mother who is in her 80s, and there was this book, and I really don't remember what it was, but it was, the thing on the back of the book said something like, a 72-year-old man at the end of his life, about to die, reflects on this, and I'm like, I can't give that to my 82-year-old mother who's golfing every day. That's ridiculous. Anyway. So I wanted to come back to this question of plotters and pantsers and how it affects our characters, because I would actually describe myself as a plotter. I am someone who typically sets out with a book believing that I know what is going to happen and how that arc is going to evolve. And I'm also someone who typically sets out on a moment in my life believing that I know what is going to happen and how that is going to evolve, and that I am in control over all of those things. And of course, what I discover eternally and daily, and apparently have to discover for myself over and over again, is that I am not. That anything can happen at any time, and that all I control, of course, is me and my own personal reaction to it. And I have the same experience that Amy has in writing my books, which is that I write them, and then I often get to the end and go, well, that was wrong. Let's try, cute. Go back and do that again. And yet I have plotted them out. So it doesn't actually help, because things change, people change. You don't know what you think until you think it, or if you're us, probably you don't know what you think until you write it. And I think that this very human process of self-discovery and self-evolution, and constantly feeling like, oh, I could do that better, or if I'd only done this differently, maybe this would have turned out differently, or I could have approached that person differently. That seeps into our books and is part of what makes them, I hope, deeply relatable. So as I'm working on my women in my stories, I'm thinking to myself, well, what does she need to understand? Like, I can see usually the character at the end. I can see the strong person that I know my character wants to become and wants to feel like. What does she need in order to get there? And I feel like that's a constantly changing process.
Yeah, I don't know what I am, because I always start with the question of a question that the book needs to answer, or that I want to answer. What if there's a master perfumer who loses their sense of smell? What sort of existential crisis do you have? What if in the first book you have inherited a $4 million apartment in Boston and you don't know where it came from because you have no relatives and you're an orphan? So immediately that starts my thinking of what would this person do? And then I think then it moves on to the need, because we're all in the, Maslow's pyramid. We have our basic needs taken care of, and depending on the class that your characters, whether it's working class or whether it's upper class or whatever it is, what do they have? What are the tools? And then you think, or I think about the world. So we live in the Northeast. All three of us live in Germany aside. Germany's like New England anyway.
Northeast of Germany.
And then you think, because we write in current times, what is the world that exists in the reader, right? So I don't have to explain a toaster because there is context for every reader around a toaster. But I may have to explain, well, I don't have to explain samosas anymore, because you all know, but I may have to explain like how to wear a sari. And so then how does that fit in? Because your character knows how to wear one, but the reader doesn't, right? So for me, plotting and pantsing is always a toggle, because I always have to think, what does the reader know? Which makes the beauty of setting our books and where we set them is that you all do the world building for us. We don't have to describe a brownstone in Brooklyn. You have a frame of reference, and it may be different for each and every one of you, but you know essentially that's a home, right? So it helps us focus more on the characters, and all the books we write are really the reason that we focus on the story and where the development goes is really about the character. And all of the other things around it, like in the sweet spot, the renovation pieces, all of the other things are the things that help propel the character forward, right? So timeline also is another thing. So books in essence, like I try to mirror human life. I try to keep my books as close to real as possible. So if I'm setting my book in 3 months' time, yes, things happen and you grow, but you're not going to be a fundamentally different person in 3 months. You might still be dealing with grief in 3 months, right? If your book is set over a year, you have that much time to show that character growth. So a lot of the plotting, pantsing doesn't work for me because I'm too in my head about like, what is this character doing? And just before I turn it over to Amy, so talk about throwing it out. This next book that's coming out is probably like, it's my 4th novel. It's probably the 7th or 8th book I wrote. And it psyched me out. I had no idea what I was doing. I talked to Katie multiple times. I told her yesterday about my book, and she's like, yeah, I know, we talked about it a year ago. I was like, oh, great. And it was this thing where it's like I couldn't figure out one of the characters. And once 4 drafts later, I figured out the character, and then I'm like, oh, okay, now the book feels right. So, yeah, when we think about strong women characters, they don't just come to us naturally. We have to work at getting them there. Amy, you want to talk about it?
Yeah, no, it's so hard. So there's the sort of the what people know and what they don't know piece of that. And my next book is a house swap book between a family in Texas and a family in Germany. So how do you do that? You've got a German husband and a German wife, and they're in the kitchen together and they're talking. Why the heck are they speaking English? Like, do you say, like, oh, this is translated from German? So, I had to come up with, okay, well, the husband's English is terrible, which I wanted to do anyway, because that's just funny. And German speaking bad English is just quite amusing. So the German language is funny, and we get to make fun of Germans. It's fine. They don't mind. And but I had to sort of figure out, like, what device could I use so that you can understand what these people are saying without sort of saying you have to sort of assume that it was translated for some reason. So his German is terrible, and he wants to practice. So he won't let his wife speak German. Like, in his German, his English is just terrible, but he says, when we're together, we have to speak English all the time. So little things like that where you have to sort of find a way to help your reader through. I want to pivot for a second to something that we were just talking about, and it kind of comes back to the book festival. One of the sort of delights, as I was saying, of making all of these new friendships kind of later in life and around fiction, both as readers and as writers, it's a pretty cool way to get to know a friend by reading their books, because it's such a glimpse into how their head works, So like if I'm reading a Fiona Davis novel, and she's such a brilliant researcher, and she's such a good writer. I don't know if any of you have read any of her historical fiction. They all take place in various buildings in New York City. But it's so Fiona when I read it. Like, I know her now, and I read her books, and they are such a wonderful reflection of her, and I feel exactly the same about my donut crew, that when I read their books, I get such a glimpse. And the what-ifs are so fascinating. I mean, the what if you inherited a really valuable piece of property in a really outstanding city, and you didn't understand why or where it came from. I mean, that was just such a brilliant idea. I love the fascinating what-ifs that kind of throw you into a story. So I just feel really lucky that I get to not only know these women, but when I read their books, I do get sort of a glimpse into how they think about things, how they see the world. And then I can talk to them later about how did you puzzle this out? Like, how did you figure out how to get that character in? And then you can also talk about the disasters, like when I wrote The Sweet Spot, 100% from the wrong perspective and started over again. Because although I liked the character and I liked her experiences, she wasn't the right one to tell the story. And I didn't know that until I was done. So, live and learn. Except you don't learn, because the next book is going to have a different set of problems. So you can't even say, wow, I won't make that mistake again, because you're going to make a new mistake. It's going to be
You can say it. I say it all the time. I'm going to be the best first drafter in my next book.
Yes, and I'm going to make it simple. I'm going to make this next one really straightforward and simple. I'm going to get the tightest timeline, and there's going to be one character in our room, like herself. And then I'm like, but she needs, a sister, and they need who's their mother? Where's that person? And the house should be. And the next thing I know, I am back again with this ridiculous family tree and different locations, and I never seem to stick with simple. So there you go.
Oh, it's such a joy to me to hear other people having that exact same question, because it's never simple. And it always goes for me. I'm like, okay, well, what's her name? I don't know. What would her mother have named her? Who is her mother? What was she experiencing when this person was born? And also, I feel like when we name someone, we often are sort of reflecting our feelings about our own name. So how did her mother feel about what she was named? Well, gee, what did her mother think when the Chicken Sisters, about the history of the alcohol laws between Kansas and Missouri that for some reason my editor didn't think y'all wanted to read? I don't know. I just don't understand these things. So I wanted to, I know where I wanted to go with this. I wanted to talk a little, in my introduction, she mentioned that all of my books share a similar theme, and I have discovered this to be true. My topic my couple of topics that I cannot get away from are is it 10 minutes till we ask for questions, or 10 minutes period? Okay, cool.
Just start thinking of your question.
Yes, start thinking of your question. So the topics that I cannot get away from are how crazy hard it is to know what makes us happy. I mean, sometimes I don't even know what I want for breakfast, let alone whether I would be happier living in Texas or living in Germany. And I'm so often wrong about which one I think would be better. And so that, and then I mentioned earlier this question of believing that I control things, which I do not. So those are themes that I have found that I just come back to in every book, including in my nonfiction, is just how freaking hard it is to even look at your own life and make a choice that you think is the best choice. And so what I wanted to ask y'all is there something that you know that you come back to every single time? I know Nam has it, so I'll let Amy think for a minute.
Yeah, mine is how can you live a hyphenated life in multi-generational families? So all of my characters, they're born here, but they grow up in an Eastern house, Indian house. East-West is an interesting diaspora because they're 180 from each other. Eastern is a very collective culture. Western is very individualistic culture. Eastern is insular. Eastern has Eastern story narrative is passive, meaning you react. Western is active, which is you act. So those are things that I keep coming back to, is how does a 35-year-old who grew up in an environment where, look, I am over 50, and if I go home to stay with my parents, my mom will still tell me whether I can go out driving in the rain or not, right? Like, there are just some things, and my non-Indian friends would be like, well, why can't you just stand up to your mom? And you're like, have you tried? Like, it doesn't work that way. There are some inherent things in our makeup of the way we were raised that make things harder that may not. And look, I don't know the perspective of not growing up that way, right? So for me, it feels like watching other people have these individualistic, independent lives, and move out at 18, and no, I don't want an arranged marriage, and all of that. Like, what is an arranged marriage, right? And so the question I keep coming back to is, how did these characters gain their individuality and independence in a cultural context that doesn't want a woman to be that, right? So my stories so far don't have so this upcoming one is the one that's closest to what I've been trying to investigate in the themes, which is a woman gets engaged at the same time as her mother decides to divorce her father. And it's an Indian American story because her parents were arranged marriage. She is a love marriage, and it is told from two perspectives of like what it means to get your individuality and independence at 60, because that's the mother's time frame, and what are you giving up at 35 to get into a partnership with someone that's just the idea of romance and intense. Because arranged marriage is like a transaction, right? You have family, education, you have these resumes that you match, and you're like, yeah, these two people, and then the astrological charts, these two people, go, you'll be successful. Love is just, you have expectations. Arranged marriage, you have no expectation of that person. You're like, we're gonna build a life together. We'll be lucky if we fall in love, but we may never fall in love, but we're gonna have a life together. Versus love is like, I myself know what heartbreak is. I don't know if my mother knows what heartbreak is because hers was an arranged marriage and they're still together, right? So it is this thing that niggles at us, that pokes at us, that continues to be a common theme in each of our books. And the one that I just started, I have to plug it because of my what if. I haven't started it, but I'm working on starting it. The what if is, what if you wake up and only remember your past life and not your present life? And then who are you? So anyway, a little plug.
Totally want to read that one. I think I would say also just what do people, but especially women, want? How do those needs and wants change as they age? And then this is just a me thing, but I constantly end up with sort of how does one deal with sort of shame and embarrassment and the unexpected, like when things happen that you have to react to that you didn't see coming. So we should probably open up to questions. See, is that that's my watch? I got an iWatch for the first time. I don't know how to work it. I just want my old watch back. It makes noises, it vibrates, it's doing all kinds of things up here. And
how are women dealing with aging?
I'm not well, and I sort of think of myself as tech savvy, so I'm insulted that this watch and I are not getting along.
So she's going to come get a question. Go get a question. While she does, I'm just going to say that toasters actually mean something different to me than they do in New England, because I grew up in the South, and a toaster is the thing you put the stuff in from the top, and then you press the button down. And so at some point in my life, I read someone saying, and you can make a really great bagel pizza in a toaster, and I was like, that's gonna be really messy. No, y'all's toasters are those flat things, and I have one now, and I understand that, but anyway. Who knows? Everything can be different.
It's in our book now.
Don't we call those toaster ovens? Aren't those different?
Yeah, toaster oven, still. Some people just say toaster, and you're like, no, don't put a bagel pizza in a toaster. That's going to be end badly. Okay, question.
Question. So, you guys talked a lot about like the community that you found here, and it sounds like that community that you found was sort of established in the sense that you were already in the program at the writing festival. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the role of mentorship or community or writing groups that kind of, and how you navigated that before you were established as writers.
So I've always been a reader. I've always been somebody who, at a very, very young age, I was at the library and checking out books, and I thought that meant that what I wanted to be when I grew up was a librarian. And it ended up high school teacher, so I thought, okay, that's the sort of the next closest thing. If you want to be surrounded by wonderful fiction, you should be a high school teacher. So I taught high school for years and then ended up working in an admissions office. And that's sort of where my first book came from, because it's sort of a book that talks about snooty high school admissions in New York City and the crazy things parents will do to get their kids into school. I really didn't have much of a community back then. It wasn't a group that was a playwriting group, and I originally wrote Small Admissions as a play. And that group was very helpful because it's part of the Actors Studio. They are very critical. I mean, very critical, which I actually needed. It thickened my skin. It taught me a lot. It taught me a lot about audience, because your readers are your audience. So to write something as a play is actually really relevant. It helps with your dialogue. It helps you not repeat yourself, because you have to assume that your readers are paying attention, that your audience members are listening. So you don't need to say something 5 times. So that was my first group. It was not a warm, loving group. It was like a bloodbath every time you presented anything. But it really was what I needed at the time, because I think what I needed was harsh critique and a sense of, if you keep doing this, you will get better. I think that's what really helped me. It wasn't until after I published that I started showing up at bookstores, at readings, where I had read the book, I had no idea who the author was, introduced myself, which takes some bravery. You know, that's not something that just comes naturally to me, to walk up to an author after a thing and just be like, hi, I think I might write a book, or I have a book coming out next year, or whatever. And what shocked me in the most wonderful way was how open writers are. You can email them afterwards and talk to them, and so I'm sorry that I didn't get to take advantage of that before, but I'm sure taking advantage of it now.
I'll just say that it's hard when you're still in, because you're still figuring out genre, you're still figuring out community, you're still figuring out the craft. If you remember the article Bad Art Friend, so I was part of a Grub Street doing that, and they were not my community, right? So the reason that this thing is so special for us is because, well, at least for Amy and I, we sought community for most of it until 3 years ago. We found some, right? So it's not perfect in the pre-publishing stage.
So I have practical ideas for you, because this was so important to me. Okay, so for starters, find a writers' conference, but don't just go, volunteer. The people you meet will also, because what you're looking for, so there are writers, there are people who want to write a book. Lots of people want to write a book. And then there are people who are going to write a book. Those are frankly, typically different people. If you're a person who's going to write a book, you want to find other people who are going to write a book. And so you want to find people who do things. So a great way to do that is volunteer at a writer's conference. Be the person, like if there's one of those speed dating things where the agents go around, even if you don't have something to pitch, you be the person who's taking the agent from table to table. First of all, they'll remember you. Secondly, you're going to meet other people who are doing things. There's a podcast called The Shit No One Tells You About Writing. It's great. She matches people up with a beta group. I suspect that those are also somebody who has got something ready for a beta reader. That's also somebody who's gonna do something. Look around in your community, even if they're not in your genre, for the other writers who are maybe publishing something small in your local newspaper. Reach out to them. My other most treasured writer, 2 of the 3 women that I do that podcast with, we've been together since before we published. And we have all since become, it's been a 10-year-long evolution. They watched me get up and leave the table when I got a text that the editor of Motherlode from the editor of Motherlode, that she'd just quit and I should apply for her job. And I was like, Sarah, Jess, sorry, gotta go. That's how we work. So try. That's what I'm telling you. Try and don't give up. I also met people that didn't click with, but don't let that stop you. Oh, and I've got another friend, literally sitting next to her in a bookstore coffee shop, glanced at her computer screen, saw she was writing dialogue, which means you're not working on a paper for a class, and I did it. I leaned over and I was like, hi, I see you're writing dialogue. Are you writing fiction? That person is Sarah Stewart Taylor, and she's still a friend of mine. just do it. Just get out there. Just put yourself out there. Take the risk. Nobody's really thinking about you. That person who's mean, you don't want them anyway. So just look for people. It'll take a while, but you will find them. Okay.
Hi, so the definition of a strong woman can be so many different things, and I'm wondering in your journeys if you have started to come towards a definition for yourself of what is a strong woman, and that, you know, when you come down the arc of your books, how do you end up with a strong woman, and what is it for each of you?
Well, I'll start because I still have the microphone. To me, a strong woman is someone who is willing to ask for what she wants, which starts with knowing what you want. And I did talk about that as my theme, but what I didn't say was that one of the reasons that many women, especially at our age, don't know what we want is that we have not been taught that we can have it. And so a strong woman is someone who can figure out what she wants and then gets past that next hurdle, which is saying it, whether it's as small as, no, I would prefer, I don't like that restaurant, or as big as, I do not wish to live in Germany, I wish to live in Texas, and making the people around her, being willing to take the chance that the people around her have to deal with her needs instead of just her dealing with theirs.
For me, strength is human, so there's like human universal, so it's not gendered, but I think when we talked about the women, the context of women and all of the load, that's where I categorize strong women, and for me, it's being able to make a choice and being able to be okay with the consequences of that choice. And to me, that's strength, because empowerment, self-empowerment, and choice are often not ours. So when you do it, you're almost going against the grain.
Yeah, I guess I think of it as finding agency, being able to identify what it is that you want and somehow make it happen, even if that means hurting somebody sometimes, but maybe you haven't spoken up for yourself before. I think I'm still figuring that out. I mean, I think that's kind of what I do every time I sit down to write a book, is I think, who are these people that I'm going to write about, and then how can I love a character who ends up in a better place than she started, even if she didn't realize that she was missing something when she started. I just like a character who ends up in a place where you go, good for her, at the end of the book.
I know you each talked about sort of lifting other authors up, and so it makes me curious if there's any particular book or author on your list right now that you're like, oh, everyone should go out and read that book with this particular maybe strong woman character.
I can go quick on that one. So one thing Nam mentioned was the Maslow's hierarchy of needs and how we have the bottom thing. And it made me think about the book Margot's Got Money Troubles, which probably most of you read because it was not a small book. But Margot's got money troubles, so she's working on the bottom part of Maslow's pyramid, but oh my gosh, she's also working on the others, and it is such it's a joy, it's really fun, it's really unusual. You should read the back of the book and see if the plot appeals, but I really enjoyed that one. So Margot's Got Money Troubles.
I actually had to look at my Goodreads because I read all the time, but I'm like, what did I just read? I'm really into these Audible originals right now. So what is her name? Janet, and I don't have my glasses on, Janet Skellion-Charles, who wrote The Paris Library, just wrote a little additional piece. I don't think it's out yet, but it's an Audible original, so you can't buy the book itself. So why does that appeal to me? Because I have a little bit of a background in theater and in playwriting, so I'm fascinated by just a book that is designed to be an Audible book. This one's called The Parisian Chapter. She takes characters from her other books and just writes this new story that is just intended to be listened to. So I highly recommend that one. I don't think that it's out yet. I also listened to another one called Unbecoming, which is also just written to be heard. They're like the old radio plays, you know? I just think it's fascinating to bring that back, and it's on my bucket list to write one of those.
Yeah, the mind goes blank sometimes with these questions, but Gaiki, which is a retelling of one of the stories of the Ramayana, which is, so it's V.S. Patel is her last name, similar, I just remember her last name for some reason. But what she writes is in the Ramayana story, she is the evil stepmother, but she writes from her point of view, so it's almost like a Gregory Maguire's Wicked. So, but she gives that character perspective, which is really interesting. So it is more like a epic sort of saga type fiction, but it really stays with you. Kaiki.
Sorry, I didn't know that was going to be spelled. I will look it up, but it's Gaiki, it's Patel, K-A-Y something, and Google will do the rest.
And I've got two more, so I'm a big fan of pre-ordering, and I will say too that the independent bookstore here will absolutely take your pre-orders. You can also do Barnes & Noble's pre-order sale right now, and Barnes & Noble has become an independent bookstore that needs our help in many ways, so I think that's fine, but you can do it anywhere. Anyway, 2 books you want to pre-order as gifts for your future self, for your summer self. One is Meg Mitchell-Moore's Mansion Beach. Such a fun combination of like a thriller and a strong woman's story with 2 multiple strong women narrators. You're really going to enjoy it if you've read her work in the past. It's great, but this is also a bit of a departure for her. Super fun. The other one is Karen Duckas's Welcome to Murder Week.
It's so good.
It's so cute. Yeah, it's Americans on a murder week in England, which can be really hokey, but this one is done really beautifully. But they're also solving the mystery of why one character's mother bought her a ticket to this murder week before she died. And it's so satisfying. It's one of those books where you get to the end and you're like, ah. Like the end of a book can make it or break it, right? And like, y'all are probably all going to go listen to the Wedding People's speech. Like, to me, the ending of that book was what really, just made it set with me. Okay.
It's Kaikeyi. So I was completely wrong.
One more question, and then we need to wrap up. I'm totally the pantser person, so now I have reams of stuff. And I wondered if you have a favorite tool for organizing it when you get to that point. Like people say Scrivener or what, I just wondered if there's anything, I've heard good and bad about that, so I just wondered.
I think you're going to hate my answer. Because it's all work that you did that counts and it matters. And I think there's actually an author, I can't remember if it was Laurie Frankel or was it Courtney Sullivan, who might even be here. Somebody who does that, drafts and then puts it in a box and puts it down in the basement and just never opens the box again. There's something to that because you did the work, which means it's in your head, and now you have to like clear the dust away, take everything that you learned from that and start again. So even when I rewrote The Sweet Spot from scratch, and a lot of the story was the same, because I was changing perspectives, I just opened a blank Scrivener. I do use Scrivener, I love it. I just opened a blank document and just kind of closed my eyes and was like, you know this, like you know this. So just, but I would never consider those wasted pages. That's all work. It's all discovery. It's all important. So it's never a waste of time to just put your thoughts to paper. Whether it ends up on the page is a completely different question. And I think it's best, personally, for me, to not put it on the page, but rather just to say, great, put it aside, and start over again. I want to also just say thank you, in case this is my last time with the mic, for everybody coming, and this was such a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. There's also craft books like Save the Cat and Story Engineering that 3-act structure, 5-act structure. So when you have that draft, then you have to go back and be like, okay, where's Act 1 end? What is my midpoint? What is that? So that also helps organize when you just have a verbal output of your book. Yeah.
I have done the same. I am a person who writes piles and piles. There are people who write too little and need to make it big. There are people who write too much and need to find the core. I am a write too much. You want to find the core of your story. You want to find the one story within your story to which everything else adheres. And then if you've got other bits, the hope is that they relate. In a beautiful world, your one story is the story of one kind of change, and then all the other things that are happening. I think of it as a tree trunk and branches. What you probably have now is a pile of leaves. Sorry. Been there, get there every time. All right, and I'd just say thank you so much for coming.